and welcome to today's webinar on how to perform continuous monitoring and support for NIST SP 800-171 compliance. We are excited to have you all here as we dive into this important discussion on cybersecurity compliance. Today, we have two outstanding experts joining us to share their insights and expertise. First, I'd like to introduce Nijel Redrick, Director of Governance, Risk Management, and Compliance Services. With over 15 years of experience in cybersecurity, Nijel has dedicated his career to evaluating security and privacy controls, implementing risk management strategies, and helping organizations stay ahead of evolving cyber threats. A proud graduate of Howard University with a degree in mathematics, Nijel holds multiple industry-leading certifications. Next, we have Bart Shaver, Program Manager for Security Operations. Bart is a highly skilled cybersecurity engineer and leader with a decade of experience supporting the Department of Defense and other U.S. government programs. Specializing in managed security services, digital forensics, and incident response, Bart and his team work to identify and remediate threats within client infrastructure quickly and effectively. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Security and Forensics from Strayer University, along with several industry certifications. Without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We'll be discussing how to perform continuous monitoring and support for NIST SP 800-171 compliance. While our agenda looks quite lengthy, we will not necessarily be spending all types of time on each bulleted item. However, we did want to highlight some very important points that we want to cover during today's presentation. We're going to begin with the definition of continuous monitoring. We're going to start the presentation by asking the question, what is continuous monitoring? So what we've done is we have merely copied and pasted the definition from NIST, which tells us what continuous monitoring is, because I want to make sure that we are speaking the same language. Continuous monitoring means different things to different people, but I want to make sure that we are on one accord as we begin our discussion for today. Now, the key takeaway from our definition is we're making sure that our continuous monitoring process is an ongoing type of activity. It is not a static activity. So that is one of the major differences between continuous monitoring and other types of security approaches where you just look at a point in time. Continuous monitoring is about maintaining real-time or near real-time situational awareness. We're going to begin with discussing how to develop a continuous monitoring plan. Now, one of the first things we want to do when developing a plan is to review our recent risk assessment results. Everybody should have a risk assessment on file. If you don't, you must conduct a risk assessment immediately. Either conduct one yourself or you can hire a third party to do so. But do get that risk assessment done. So we want to review risk assessment results. We also want to take a look at any third-party assessment results, that is, any organizations that have assessed us. And that also applies to any third-party solution providers that we utilize. We do want to take a look at those results because our vendors that we utilize impact our security posture. We also want to take a look at any POAMs that we have in place, that is any plans of action and milestones. And if you did not have an opportunity to view our previous webinar, do take a look at how to develop a smart POAM. So just give me a few examples of some of the data points to take a look at when developing a continuous monitoring plan. After reviewing those different data points, you want to establish metrics. You want to establish or determine those things that you will measure to help you determine the strength of your security posture. You also want to define or establish frequencies for monitoring various controls. As a lot of us know, NIST SP 800-171 Revision 2 comes equipped with 110 security requirements. And some people call those controls. But then those requirements can actually be broken down, so much so that out of that 110 requirements, there are actually a total of 332 individual requirements. So some requirements have multiple requirements that compose one control. So you want to establish a frequency for monitoring those controls. And frequencies, what that means is, do you want to monitor it daily, weekly? You can do hourly, monthly, quarterly, annually, some type of frequency like that. You also want to establish frequencies and mechanisms for validating the effectiveness of the controls. And that's going to be critical because remember, we have at a high level 110 requirements, but then again, you have 332 individual requirements. So you want to figure out a means to, you want a frequency for validating those and also the mechanism that you will use. For example, a security tool. Certainly there are manual ways to validate effectiveness, but then there are also security tools that can be utilized to validate the effectiveness of the controls. Now, another great idea, and you're going to hear more about this from my colleague, Bart Shaver, he's going to actually map some security tools and security functions or security operations to the various NIST 800-171 requirements. The next step is to validate the effectiveness of the controls. Again, NIST SP 171 has 110 requirements or 110 controls, and remember those 332 individual ones. After you've done your, you've talked about our risk assessment, we've talked about the frequencies, you want to start analyzing all the data that you compiled throughout this whole process. You analyze that data and then you report any findings. Now, the reporting findings, this should go as high up the organizational ladder as possible. Security is everybody's job, but certainly we know in these days, with these heightened sense of alerts and cyber threats, we want to make sure that executive management is aware of our security posture. So we want to make sure that we report any findings in a manner that management can digest them so they can make risk-based decisions. Now, some findings can be resolved pretty readily. You still want to report those. You can report that those have been resolved. However, there are some findings that might take some time. So then you might want to develop, you will want to develop a plan of action and milestones for any finding that you cannot remediate immediately. And again, take a look at our previous webinar, how to develop a SMART plan of action and milestone, or a SMART POAM. And lastly, you want to make sure that you review and update your continuous monitoring plan. I recommend certainly on at least an annual basis. However, during your continuous monitoring processes, actually as you execute those processes, you might see a need to update the continuous monitoring plan. So now I'm going to hand things over to my colleague Bart, and what he's going to do is map some of these NIST 800-171 requirements to some of the security tools and security operations activities.
Thanks, Nigel. Now let's look at how security operations align with NIST SP 800-171. Security operations provides organizations continuous monitoring and visibility into IT operations for anomaly detection and threat reduction. SOC supports several key controls for continuous monitoring, including 3.12.3 for ongoing monitoring of security controls, Control 3.3.1 for logging system activity to detect unauthorized access, and 3.12.2 in requiring scanning for vulnerabilities, along with 3.14.1 ensuring timely remediation of security flaws. Our security operations should incorporate security information and event management systems for real-time monitoring, vulnerability management for continuous risk identification, endpoint protection for threat reduction and response, and email security to protect controlled and classified information from phishing and malware. SIEM plays a critical role in continuous monitoring by aggregating logs from multiple sources, detecting threats in real time, and correlating security events. NIST requirements mandate federal agencies to log system activity and monitor for anomalies, which aligns with Controls 331 and 312.3. SIEM solutions like ArcSight, Splunk, Logarithm, and Microsoft Sentinel centralize log collection, define alert rules for suspicious behavior, and generate dashboards for real-time visibility. SOC analysts and SIEM engineers continuously update and tune logging and alerts to align with threat intelligence and agency-specific use cases. The ultimate goal is proactive threat reduction and immediate escalation of security incidents. Also, let's look at vulnerability management. A strong vulnerability management program is necessary for compliance with Controls 312.2 and 314.1. Organizations must regularly scan systems that handle CUI, identify vulnerabilities, and ensure timely remediation. Using tools like Tenable, Qualys, Microsoft Intune, and BigFix, we can schedule daily or weekly vulnerability scans, prioritize risks, and track patch compliance. The result is continuous visibility into security gaps with actionable reporting for remediation. We also must leverage security configuration benchmarks like DISA STIGs, CIS, and vendor best practice to best identify the existence of configuration flaws that can lead to compromise. Also, we got to look at EDR, endpoint detection and response. EDR solutions provide advanced security for endpoints by detecting and responding to threats in real time. Controls 3.7.2 and 3.14.6 require protection against malicious code and monitoring of system usage. Solutions like SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, and Trellix EDR analyze behavior to detect anomalies, automatically quarantine affected systems, and offer rollback capabilities to restore endpoints to a clean state. By deploying EDR, we can ensure robust endpoint security for systems handling CUI. EDR solutions may incorporate AI/ML-based and heuristic detection to identify threats based on behavior and anomalies, while providing host-based intrusion detection and prevention capabilities. Another thing we need to look at is email security. Email security is another crucial component for continuous monitoring. Controls 3.1.3 and 3.14.5 require organizations to secure communications and detect unauthorized access attempts. Solutions like Proofpoint, Mimecast, and Barracuda provide phishing and malware detection, behavioral analytics, and identify compromised accounts and automated protection to prevent unauthorized access to CUI. As phishing remains the most leveraged attack methodology, email security solutions must be capable of detection and preventing transmission of phishing messages. Continuous email monitoring enhances an organization's ability to detect and respond to email threats before they escalate. We also must look at automation as a key enabler of effective continuous monitoring. Control 3.12.4 emphasizes the need for ongoing monitoring and corrective actions, with Control 3.12.2 requiring action plans for identified risks. By integrating SIEM with other security tools, we can automate correlation of alerts, incident escalation, and reporting. The incorporation of multiple technologies can be enabled through extended detection and response, also known as XDR, and security orchestration, automation, and response, also known as SOAR, solutions. Compliance dashboards can provide real-time visibility into the status of monitored controls and regular reports such as weekly threat summaries and monthly compliance validations to ensure decision makers stay informed. Now I'll give it back to Nigel.
Hope you all enjoyed Bart's presentation as he mapped those requirements to the various security operations tools and activities. So I'm going to continue with discussing elements of a continuous monitoring plan. And what I'm going to do with that, or how I'm going to do that, is I'm going to provide some example metrics and some frequencies. For some of these metrics, some of them are pretty straightforward, so I won't take time to elaborate. Others might not be, so I'll take a little time to speak about those particular metrics and also talk a little bit about the frequencies and why the frequencies are as they are as opposed to how others might think they need to be. Training. Now, training is straightforward, but I did want to just point out here, just literally and figuratively for awareness' sake, awareness training is a real big deal. every organization should ensure that all employees engage and participate in awareness training on at least an annual basis. And awareness just simply means being aware of the different security protocols that are required within the organization. Second, the training associated with the personnel, with the security personnel on staff. Those personnel should take training at least annually. Now, these days, most security personnel have one or more certifications, and to maintain those certifications, annual training is required. So your security professionals, they're aware of these different certification requirements. So you just want to make sure that they maintain their certifications. But they should also take awareness training, because that's slightly different. Well, not slightly, it's much different. A security professional might take training on an intrusion detection system, whereas the typical end user will not take that type of training. So just the difference in knowledge there lets us know that awareness training and security personnel training are different. So when I said that all employees should take awareness training, that's security personnel plus all other end users. And again, those trainings should be conducted annually. The next metric I want to talk about is the number of devices configured in accordance with the baseline configuration policy. Configuration management is a very big deal these days. A lot of organizations suffer breaches due to misconfigurations, either a third-party misconfiguration, could be cloud-related, it could be on premises, but nevertheless, cloud configurations have been the cause of some breaches. So what we want to do is make sure that the number of devices, or not want to make sure that all devices that are configured in accordance with the baseline config policy. And it's a good idea to measure that number in real time. Similarly, it's a great idea to provide the real-time status of devices and their patch status. Hackers routinely exploit vulnerabilities associated with endpoints. And it's a great idea to know which of your devices on the network are not fully patched. So it's a great idea to keep that type of real-time data also. Now, the next bullet is related to critical and high-risk vulnerabilities. That is related to the number of devices that are fully patched. However, in this instance, we're highlighting the fact that there are devices on the network that are not fully patched, and compound that with the fact that they have a critical and or a high vulnerability. So it is very imperative to know the status of any device on the network, or to note that any device is on the network that is operating with a critical or high risk vulnerability. And as you see, I felt so strongly about the critical and high risk vulnerabilities, I repeated it on the next slide. So certainly do make sure that our critical and high risk vulnerabilities are addressed and the patch status is known in real time. Next item we want to take a look at is the number of policies that require updates. So NIST 800-171 revision 2 does not specify much about policies, nor and certainly not about updating them. But it is a best practice to review and update policies on an annual basis. Next, we have the time to detect and resolve incidents. This metric helps us to address our incident response capability. So it's a good idea to find out and report on a quarterly basis the time that the organization takes to detect and resolve incidents. Next, we have the number of malicious code infections. It's a good idea to know the number of devices on the network that are infected with malicious code. So similar to the patch status, the configuration status, it is a good idea to know the number of malicious code infections that are present on the network at this time or in real time. We also want to keep track of the number of unauthorized access incidents. And certainly you want to act upon such an incident immediately, but from a measuring standpoint, tracking that on a weekly basis will be fine. And similarly, for a denial of service attack, you definitely want to address that immediately. However, reporting on it on a weekly basis is sufficient. I have a few more examples of metrics to capture. The number of acceptable use violations, and reporting on those weekly. And those are violations where users violate acceptable use policies using organizational IT equipment. It's a good idea to keep track of the number of failed security controls and taking a look at that quarterly. Now, when we say failed controls, I'll just kind of highlight three types of controls. You have what they call management controls, operational controls, and technical controls. So management controls, as we talked about on an earlier slide, reviewing and updating policies, your policies are more so your management controls. Those are the controls that kind of tell you what to do, your policies and procedures. Your operational controls, those are typically the controls that are executed by people. Configuration management is an example of a operational control. And lastly, a technical control is a control that typically is performed or executed by a device or an IT component. So it's a good idea to have an understanding of the number of failed controls and to take a look at that snapshot on a quarterly basis. Next, we want to take a look at the number of controls that are just simply not implemented. Yes, it is the case that some organizations have not implemented controls, and we talked about POAMs earlier. So anytime you don't have a control implemented, you want to make sure that you do have a POAM for that. But it is a good idea to know the number of security controls that simply are not implemented. And the next metric would be the assessments. You want to make sure that you're monitoring your assessments, and you want to have at least two internal assessments per year. Some call it an internal audit. So it'd be a great idea for twice a year. And from an external assessment standpoint, it's good to have a third party to come in on at least an annual basis to give you an idea about how well your security posture, or how good security posture is. Now what I've provided you with is a sample continuous monitoring plan. Provided you with the continuous monitoring task and the frequency. So what I've done is I've taken the examples discussed in the previous slides, and I've given and those associated frequencies, and just consolidated them into a table. So now you have a continuous monitoring plan. So what this table tells you to do, it tells you, for example, to review and report device configuration reports. Do that daily. It can be in the form of a dashboard. So when we say the word report, don't necessarily think a report has to be some document that has to be submitted. My recommendation is to automate as much as possible, and certainly dashboarding is the way to go. But what I did want to leave you with is a sample continuous monitoring plan to kind of pull all of these ideas together into one slide.
Thank you, Nigel and Bart, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you, audience, for joining us today. We are so happy that you got to be here. Do you want to learn more? Scan the QR code to view our NIST SP 800-171 white paper. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at NIST_SP 800-171 at ibsscore.com. Now, are you interested in a free consultation? Use that same email to reach out to us, and somebody will get back to you shortly. We look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you again for joining us today.